There was a receiver in the NFL who ran a 4.7 40-yard dash. In a league where speed is everything, where guys are clocking 4.3s and 4.4s, this man was slow. Painfully slow by NFL standards. He had no business being on the same field as the defensive backs who were supposed to cover him. They were faster, they were stronger, they were younger, and yet week after week, year after year, this slow receiver made the fastest cornerbacks in professional football look completely lost. He caught passes they swore they had defended. He got open when the film said he should have been blanketed. He turned defensive coordinators into confused, angry men standing on the sidelines screaming at their players, asking how in the world did he get that open again. His name was Fred Biletnikoff. He played 13 seasons for the Oakland Raiders. He caught 589 passes for 8,974 yards and 76 touchdowns. He made 6 Pro Bowls. He won a Super Bowl. He was named Super Bowl MVP. He was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And the craziest part of all of this, the part that makes no sense to anyone who watches the tape, is that nobody could ever actually stop him. Not the fast guys, not the physical guys. Not the Hall of Famers he played against. Nobody. And if you stay with me through this entire video, I'm going to show you exactly how a man who should not have been able to compete at the highest level became one of the most unstoppable receivers in the history of the game. This is the story of how Fred Biletnikoff broke football. Let me start by making something very clear. Fred Biletnikoff was not an athlete in the way we think about NFL athletes today. He was not jumping out of the gym. He was not running past defenders. He was not doing backflips in the end zone. He was 6 feet tall. He weighed 190 pounds. He ran slow. He was not particularly strong. If you put his measurables up on a draft board today, every single team in the league would pass on him. They would say too small, too slow, not enough explosiveness, not an NFL body, and they would be wrong, completely wrong. Biletnikoff grew up in Erie, Pennsylvania. He played college football at Florida State, and even there, even in college, people doubted him. They said he did not have the physical tools. They said he would not be able to compete against faster defensive backs. And Biletnikoff just kept catching footballs. He caught them in college, he caught them in practice, he caught them in games that mattered. And in 1965, the Oakland Raiders selected him in the second round of the NFL draft with the 37th overall pick. Al Davis saw something in him that other teams missed. Davis did not care about 40 times, he cared about whether a guy could play football. And Fred Biletnikoff could play football. But here is the thing, when Biletnikoff got to the NFL, everything people said about him was true. He was slow. Cornerbacks were faster than him. Safeties were faster than him. Linebackers were probably faster than him. On paper, he should have been eaten alive. And in his first few seasons, he was good, but not great. He was figuring it out, learning, adjusting to the speed of the professional game. But by the late 1960s and early 1970s, something started happening that nobody could explain. Fred Biletnikoff stopped being a guy who was just good. He became completely unguardable. And this is where the story gets interesting. Because Biletnikoff did not suddenly get faster, he did not grow 4 inches, he did not add 50 pounds of muscle, he just understood something that most receivers did not understand and most defensive backs refused to believe. Football is not actually about speed. Football is about timing, about positioning, about knowing where the defender is going to be before the defender knows. And Fred Biletnikoff mastered that better than anyone who has ever played the position. Let me paint you a picture of what it looked like when Biletnikoff ran a route. He would line up at the line of scrimmage. The cornerback across from him would be thinking, this is going to be easy. The guy is slow, I can sit on his routes, I can jump anything he tries, and then the ball would be snapped. Biletnikoff would take his first step. Not fast, not explosive, just controlled, precise. And then he would make his move. A stutter step, a head fake, a sudden stop. A change of direction so crisp and so perfectly timed that the defensive back, the guy who was faster, the guy who should have had the advantage, would be left standing there flat-footed watching Biletnikoff catch the football 5 yards away from him. It happened so often that defensive coordinators started studying the film, trying to figure out what they were missing. And the problem was they were not missing anything. They knew what Biletnikoff was going to do. They knew his routes, they knew his tendencies. They knew everything. And it did not matter. because knowing what Fred Biletnikoff was going to do and actually stopping him were two completely different things. One of the most famous things about Biletnikoff was his hands, and I do not mean that in some generic way, I mean his actual hands. Before every single game, Biletnikoff would coat his hands in stickum. For those of you who do not know, stickum was this tar-like sticky substance that receivers used to help them catch the football. It was legal back then. And Biletnikoff used so much of it that his uniform, his helmet, his arms, everything was covered in this brown, sticky goo by the end of the game. He looked like he had been dipped in glue. Teammates said you did not want to stand too close to him on the sideline because if you touched him, you were not getting that jersey clean. But the result of all that stickum was that Fred Biletnikoff did not drop footballs. Ever. If the ball touched his hands, it was caught. It did not matter if he was getting hit. It did not matter if the throw was bad. It did not matter if the coverage was perfect. If Fred Biletnikoff got his hands on the football, the play was over. Completion? Defensive backs from that era have talked about how demoralizing it was to play against him. They would be in perfect position. They would have their hands on him. They would be running step for step with him. And the quarterback would throw the ball and Biletnikoff would just reach up and pluck it out of the air like he was picking an apple off a tree, and there was nothing they could do. They played it perfectly, and he still beat them. Now, let me take you to the biggest moment of Fred Biletnikoff's career. The 9th of January, 1977. Super Bowl 11. The Oakland Raiders versus the Minnesota Vikings. The game was played at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. Over 100,000 people in the stands, millions watching on television, and Fred Biletnikoff was about to put on a performance that would define his entire legacy. The Vikings that year had one of the best defenses in football. They had made it to 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. They were fast, they were physical, they were disciplined, and their game plan was simple: shut down the Raiders' passing attack, make them one-dimensional, force mistakes. But nobody told Fred Biletnikoff that he was supposed to be shut down. That day, Biletnikoff caught 4 passes for 79 yards. Now, if you are looking at that stat line, you might think, okay, that is solid, but it is not legendary. But here is what the stats do not tell you. Every single one of those catches came at the exact moment the Raiders needed it most. Third down conversions, red zone catches, plays that kept drives alive, plays that put points on the board. Biletnikoff was not padding stats. He was winning a football game. The Raiders won 32-14. It was not close. And when the game was over, the Super Bowl MVP award did not go to the quarterback. It did not go to the running back. It went to the slow receiver from Erie, Pennsylvania, who had just carved up one of the best defenses in football. Fred Biletnikoff was named Super Bowl 11 MVP. And if you go back and watch the film, you can see why. The Vikings had no answer for him. None. But here is the part of the story that people forget. That Super Bowl was not some fluke. That was not Biletnikoff having one great game and riding it into the Hall of Fame. That was just Fred Biletnikoff being Fred Biletnikoff. He did that for 13 straight years. He did it against the best defensive backs of his generation: Mel Blount, Willie Brown, Lem Barney, Mike Haynes. Guys who are in the Hall of Fame themselves. And Biletnikoff beat all of them. Repeatedly over his career, Biletnikoff caught 589 passes. That might not sound like a huge number compared to modern receivers who catch 100 balls a season, but remember, this was the 1960s and 1970s. Teams did not throw the ball 40 times a game. The passing game was not the centerpiece of every offense. Running the football and playing defense won championships. And even in that era, even in a run-first league, Fred Biletnikoff was one of the most productive receivers in football. He made the Pro Bowl 6 times. 1,967, 1,968, 1,969, 1,970, 1,971, and 1,972. 6 straight years where the league looked at every receiver in professional football and said Fred Biletnikoff is one of the best. And during that stretch, the Raiders were one of the most dominant teams in the AFL and NFL. They made the playoffs almost every single year. They were in championship games, they were in Super Bowls. And the reason they were able to throw the football with confidence, The reason their quarterbacks trusted the passing game was because they knew that no matter what the coverage looked like, number 25 was going to find a way to get open. But the numbers only tell part of the story. If you really want to understand how great Fred Biletnikoff was, you have to listen to the people who played with him and against him. His quarterback said he was the most reliable target they ever had. If the play called for Biletnikoff to be at a certain spot at a certain time, he was there. Every single time. No guessing, no freelancing, just perfect execution. Darryl LaMonica, Ken Stabler, George Blanda, all of them trusted Biletnikoff more than any other receiver on the field. And the defensive backs who had to cover him, they tell a different kind of story. They talk about how frustrating it was, how nothing they did worked. They would press him at the line, and he would slip past. They would give him space, and he would break on the ball before they could react. They would play zone, and he would sit down in the soft spot like he had drawn up the defense himself. There was no scheme that worked, no coverage that shut him down. Fred Biletnikoff was a problem that could not be solved. One cornerback from that era said it best. He said covering Fred Biletnikoff was like trying to guard a ghost. You knew where he was supposed to be, but by the time you got there, he was gone. And that is the perfect way to describe it. Biletnikoff did not beat you with athleticism, he beat you with intelligence, with preparation. With an understanding of leverage and angles and timing that most players never develop, he studied film obsessively. He knew what every defensive back in the league liked to do. He knew their tendencies. He knew when they would bite on a fake. He knew when they would play soft. And he used all of that information to make them look foolish. There is a famous story about Biletnikoff and his preparation. Teammates said that he would watch film until his eyes hurt. He would sit in the film room long after everyone else had gone home, rewinding the same play over and over, studying the footwork of the cornerback, looking for any tiny detail that would give him an advantage. And then on game day, all of that work would show up. He would run a route that looked exactly like something the defender had seen on film. The defender would react the way he always reacted, and Biletnikoff would do something just slightly different. A half step quicker, a sharper cut, a perfectly timed glance back at the quarterback, and just like that, he was open. It was not flashy, it was not going to make SportsCenter, but it was devastatingly effective. And it worked against everyone. After the 1978 season, Fred Biletnikoff retired from professional football. 13 seasons, all with the Oakland Raiders. 1 Super Bowl ring, 1 Super Bowl MVP, 6 Pro Bowls, and a legacy that should have made him one of the most talked about receivers in NFL history. But something strange happened after he retired. The football world just kind of moved on. New receivers came into the league, faster guys, bigger guys. Guys who put up gaudier stats and pass-happy offenses. And Fred Biletnikoff, the guy who was never the fastest, but somehow could not be stopped, faded into the background. In 1988, Fred Biletnikoff was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That should have been the moment where everyone remembered, where his name was cemented alongside the greatest to ever play. But even that did not quite do it, because Biletnikoff played in an era before ESPN ran highlights on a loop 24 hours a day, before the internet turned every great play into a viral clip, before social media made legends out of players in real time. He played in the 1960s and 1970s, when if you did not see the game live, you might never see it at all. And so today, if you ask a casual football fan to name the greatest receivers of all time, they will say Jerry Rice. They will say Randy Moss, they will say Terrell Owens, they will say Calvin Johnson, all incredible players, all deserving of that conversation, but most of them will not say Fred Biletnikoff, and that is a tragedy. Because Fred Biletnikoff did something that none of those other guys did. He dominated without the physical gifts. He proved that football is not just about how fast you run or how high you jump. It is about how well you understand the game. And nobody understood the game better than him. Today, Florida State University gives out the Biletnikoff Award every single year to the best receiver in college football. It is one of the most prestigious individual awards in the sport. And that is fitting. Because even though the NFL world has largely forgotten Fred Biletnikoff, the people who actually understand football, the coaches, the scouts, the players, they know what he was, they know what he did, and they know that there will never be another receiver quite like him. Fred Biletnikoff was not the fastest, he was not the biggest, he was not the strongest, but he was the most precise, the most intelligent, the most unstoppable. And if you go back and watch the tape, if you study the way he played the game, you will see something that no highlight reel can ever capture. You will see mastery, pure mastery of the wide receiver position. And that is why this video exists. Because legends like Fred Biletnikoff deserve to be remembered. Not as footnotes, not as old names that get mentioned once a year during a college award ceremony, but as exactly what they were. The best to ever do it. If this story changed the way you think about what it takes to be great at football, do me a favor right now and hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me if you think Fred Biletnikoff belongs in the conversation with the greatest receivers of all time. And if you are not subscribed to this channel yet, what are you waiting for? We are telling the stories that everyone else ignores. The players who deserve their respect. The legends who got forgotten. Subscribe right now and make sure you do not miss the next one. Fred Biletnikoff was never the fastest, but nobody could stop him. Remember that.